Hello and welcome to yet another crowd design session for Alice Asylum. This is crowd design session number 22, and we are coming to you from our super secret Discord server, where apparently joining makes you 57% more interesting. So, to those of you that are here today, congratulations, you are exactly 57% more interesting. For those of you who are listening after the fact, see, there you go. On YouTube, we're sorry, you're just not that interesting, but you can solve that by becoming a patron. There are links to that in the description below, which will not only make you 57% more interesting, but will also make it so that you are supporting the creation of art and story and design that goes towards the next Alice game. So today we are going to be talking about the next Alice game. We actually have a number of topics on the list for today. So first up, I think we're going to do sort of a recap of where things are at. This was per request from one of our insane children / mods. And then we're also going to take a look at the FAQ section over on the Asylum Wiki. Again, there are links in the description below to that. And then last but certainly not least, we're going to have a review of some of the recent posts over on Patreon, which are related to Alice's journey into the Hatter's Domain, which is a representation of the bargaining stage in her PTSD. And then I think also taking a look at sort of how that stage and the Hatter and his role, how those things play into the broader narrative for the game. So that's kind of where we're going today. With that out of the way, I guess I'll give our mods a moment to get all their woos and stuff out of their systems.
So, yeah, thanks for joining us. Goes without saying, potential spoilers ahead. Let's all have fun and some good chat.
It's always fun to get the spoilers. But then again, I suppose you could just be doing dishes in the background.
Could be.
Somebody needs to explain about the microphone emoji.
Well, who would like to do the honors?
I'll throw down the mic. Dropping the mic there. Boom. So if you have something to say and you got a microphone that works on Discord, you can throw up that mic and be all like, hey, I have ideas, I have comments. And we'll say, all right, we'll talk to you. We'll let you talk. You'll give us talk, and we'll hear what you say. Does that work, everybody?
Word.
Word.
Awesome.
Wow. I feel
That was fresh.
very white now. Okay, let's just jump right into it. So right off the bat, I think what we're going to do is, because it is the end of the year, and I was explaining to Magus earlier, I don't view the end of a lunar calendar year as being the end of the year for our asylum. I actually think we got things really off the ground over on Patreon in October, and I think that was October 2017. So I kind of view October and Halloween as our kind of yearly cycles. So we did have an annual inmate report for 2019, which was posted up on October 7th over on Patreon. If you want to go check that out, it is literally called Annual Inmate Report 2019. And that also happened to celebrate 70 years of communism in the People's Republic of China. So yay. In that report, we did talk about some of the milestones that we've hit. We talked about who our team are in terms of artists and writers and Martin. And we also talked about the overall growth of Insane Children that we've seen on Patreon. I think at the time of that writing, we were getting close to around 4,000. So that's pretty significant. That also puts us sort of in the top 10 of all of the gaming channels on Patreon on most months since we really took off. Now, I think one of the things obviously that comes up very often beyond all the progress we're making on art and story is, where are things with EA? And there is a section in that post called Are We There Yet?, which specifically dives into this. There's not a lot I can do to update that section at this point, because since that post in October, there simply hasn't been that much movement on this front. The last we left it, an updated version of the pitch for Asylum was sent over to EA, and they have been reviewing that, and we have gotten positive feedback on that review process, and we've been told that yeah, it is being reviewed. But one of the things is that end of year is a very slow time for business development, for people in either the lawyer business, the business development business, or the executive business, because they all tend to go on vacation. And that all starts around Thanksgiving, which we just passed through. It goes through Christmas, and business doesn't really sort of get back to normal usually until around mid-January. So we are currently in that sort of blackout period where I don't expect that we're going to hear anything. That being said, I did send a follow-up email to our BizDev guy at EA that was around Thanksgiving, and I didn't really expect to get a response from him because he is an American, and I assume he's off celebrating the massacre of Turkey Day somewhere. But we'll see. We may get some sort of answer this month, December. I doubt it. I think it's a much higher chance we'll hear something in January. Now, I don't have like a crystal ball, so I can't tell you the future. I know that's sad, but I can say that it appears that the market is shifting, and EA as well are shifting back towards a greater emphasis on single player, narrative driven action adventure games. And I take the recent launch of Jedi Fallen Order and the success that it's seeing as being a huge positive for our efforts here with Alice. More so because I don't know how many of you have played it, but in the first 30 minutes of that game, they basically run through every single one of the core gameplay mechanics that you find in Alice Madness Returns. In essence, that game using the Unreal Engine is almost like a copy-paste clone of an Alice type game, a platform action adventure game, except of course it's skinned inside of the Star Wars universe. And they did a fantastic job. It's even got in the very early minutes some very surreal sort of, you're facing down a hallway in one direction, and when you spin around, you're facing down a different hallway in another surreal location, sort of nightmare sequences that are very reminiscent of the Asylum sequences in Madness Returns. So when I say that there's similarities there, I mean like there's a lot of similarities in how the technology was leveraged to build that product. And I think that's a good thing for us because apparently that's the best-selling Star Wars game that the world has seen in quite some time, and it's one of, if not the best-selling of EA's single-player games in quite a long time as well. So hopefully the Christmas season will continue the success of that product, and all the EA execs will come back from that success in January saying, hey, what other IP can we do this with that looks like this? And we can all scream, Alice! And that might work out for us.
Fingers crossed.
That's a bit of the recap. I'm curious to know if there are additional questions I can try to answer that are not answered either in that post or in what I just said. So does anybody have anything else that they're concerned about, they're curious about, anything else that you'd like to hear as we're kind of heading into the end of the year here?
Alice on Elm Street keeps asking if we have marketing ideas, where can we drop those?
Here.
You can always share marketing ideas. I'd be curious to understand when you talk about marketing ideas, do you mean for the actual physical product that is going to be the retail game we're selling, or like the marketing of trying to make the pitch work when we go to talk to EA? Sadly, I'd say that in both instances, like for marketing of the full-blown retail product, that's a really long ways off. I don't know that, I mean, ideas are fine. You want to put them up on the wiki or whatever, but I mean, I don't think we can make much use of them at this point. The pitch process with EA, I don't think there's much more we can do. Like I talk with Martin about this, very openly on a pretty frequent basis, and it is just a lot of wait and see. Like we've already produced some really impressive pitch content, and we continue to produce art and story that I think goes above and beyond what a lot of development teams have ready, even when they start development. So I don't know that there's much more by way of marketing we can do, but if you have ideas, always happy to hear those. trying to see if there's any other comments or questions. There is a link to that Patreon post in Discord here, and we'll also try to make sure to put that in the YouTube description as well. So if you're curious about the year-end update, that is a public open post that anyone can go to read. I see that like the header image for that, it is the art and design team for Alice Asylum. And I did want to mention that we did just add a new artist, and that one of the reasons he's being added is because he specializes in world building, as in the buildings and the locations and the maps. And I really want to spend next year, 2020, starting to drill down on specific locations and also very much on the actual movement through the game, dialogue, scenes, elements of action. I want to start drafting copies of pieces like that starting at the beginning of the game, and having someone like him on board is really critical to that kind of work. All right, so next question up here from Truth Decay. Are you still considering relocating, or do you think production will be in China, or is it too early to tell? So we are still thinking about relocating, but that's more of just like a China question in general. So the truth is that China is making it more and more difficult for people to do business here. It's becoming a much more internally focused, exclusive market, whereas when I first got here, they were very interested in attracting large chunks of sort of foreign creative and other kind of technical experts and talent. These days, it feels like they're kind of pulling back from that. So I think that in the long term, no matter what, my time and my family's time and perhaps Martin's time in China, there's, I think, a chance that it's going to be, we're spending less time here and maybe even moving away from here before too long. Now, with regards to the game development stuff, let's say that we do pull the trigger on something next year. There's a couple of options we've talked about. One is that we get funding and then we go and build our own team, which means we might build that team with a footprint in China, like asset production or tech production, and then we might build a footprint in Thailand, like doing art outsourcing in Thailand, and maybe the core tech team in China. We could do a hybrid, or we could find that where the money comes from also happens to be a developer or publisher who says, hey, we have a development team. That team is in the US, or that team is in Poland, or that team is in, we don't know where yet. In which case the team might be in a location different from, say, wherever my home happens to be. And then there's a kind of remote collaboration thing going on. So it's hard to say, but I will say that I think that at least for the next 12 months, I expect that myself, Martin, our family, and the business that we're doing is based here in Shanghai. And then after that, or as things kind of unfold, we'll see what happens. Alice on Elm Street says, the ideas I have could be used to help with crowdfunding and could start now, honestly. I'm in grad school program for marketing RN. That's kind of my thing. Sure, that's fine. If you've got ideas, I think that might be something that you either send to us over on Patreon, or you could send as an email just directly to us, like support@mysterious.design. And then we could try to see if there's stuff that might work. So, Truth Decay says world building would be super cool to be a part of. Yes, I am very excited for that as well. And to be honest, I was not really ready to do world building until recently because I wasn't really sure what the story was we were trying to tell. I mean, I knew it was back in the asylum, and I knew it was young Alice, and I knew a lot of the kind of large chunks, but I didn't feel comfortable about the beginning, middle, and end of it until just very recently. And I'm not sure why it took me so long to get to a point where I thought I knew what the story could be, but it just did. And I can't say it was like painful or a struggle. It just took longer for me to feel like, hey, this is it, than it usually does. So we have another Patreon post that's been put up here. This is the most recent update. It contains artwork from the new artist. And again, I'll try to put that link in the description below if you are following along on YouTube. Vela says, no blood or death displays. This makes Alice difficult to make in China. I think this is in reference to the concern that if you were publishing a game in China, there is a Ministry of Culture who controls the ratings and the content of games that they're licensing for publishing in the local market. But actually, that doesn't have any impact on the types of games that are made here. So you can make violent content in China. And actually, I think most of you would probably be surprised to learn that EA, Activision, Sony, Microsoft, they all have massive outsourcing farms here where a lot of the, or most of the art assets that you see in the games that you play, including the M-rated, violent, bloody, magical ones, are actually made in China. And so the restriction on the content of games only applies to games published in China, not to games that are made in China and then exported out. So that's something to think about. Connor Carbon says, I think a transmedia approach would really benefit this IP. Connor, that is 100% correct. The problem is that the transmedia pitch is usually built off the fact that you could have a game and a film. And as I think we all know, the film rights were long ago separated away from the ownership package. So EA owns the game rights and a bunch of jerks in Hollywood own the film rights. Then because of that, the chance that we would be able to put together a transmedia pitch has basically been destroyed. So what we're focusing on mainly here is the pitch to get someone to fund and publish a new game. And I don't think there's much hope in doing anything with the film stuff at this point. So Bella says, selling in China would be tough. Yes, it's true. It would be difficult to sell Alice. But that being said, it's very easy if you're a game player in China to buy Sony and Xbox game discs. There's supposed to be restrictions, but people just buy stuff from outside, and it doesn't really stop anything. So even if we make the game in China, but we don't sell it directly here, but we sell it in Hong Kong, it'll end up back in China and people playing it anyway. So that's just something to keep in mind. Yes,
it's really not hard to get games here, is it?
Not at all.
Don't even bother saying it. Just don't even bother saying it.
I think, for me, like I download games off the PlayStation Store. I mean, it just happens instantly. And I don't even use a VPN to try to pretend that I'm not in China and I'm downloading, M-rated violent games without any problem at all. So,
oh, that's fine. I'm saying about the hashtag coming up. We don't talk about that anymore.
I remember that.
So, is there any other question or comment that we can make about the general question of are we there yet? About what's going on with EA, what's going on with the pitch process. So while you think about that, just to recap, I don't expect we're going to hear anything from EA during this month of December, and probably not until later in January. And when we do hear something, I'm hoping it's going to be influenced by the success of the Star Wars game. Now, I did say to Megas and Asteria Visual before we went live that if EA does come back early next year and say, hey, guy, we thought about it and we're just not that interested right now. We as a collective will then have in our hands a decision to make. And, one would be to throw in the towel and be like, okay, well, we couldn't make it work. EA's not interested. We'll accept their refusal and we'll move on. We'll, who knows? We'll figure out what we do. The other, path we could take is we won't accept your no, because in fact you can't stop us from working on materials and pitching you. You may not think you want to say yes, but we don't think you understand what you're saying, no to. So we will continue to develop the story and the art, and we'll start building out the pitch documents in such a way that at some point, what we're presenting, you just look stupid to say no to. And so that's another direction we could take. But again, guessing at that right now, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know which way it's going to go. But we will have, I hope in January, we'll have some news back from them, and then we'll have a sense of needing to either make a decision or continue on our way. So we'll keep you updated on that as it happens. So there's a couple comments on that. Truth Decay saying, no, adapt and proceed. Lol, throw in the towel. Mega says, riot. And Anarchy says, ancient child. Connor Carbon says, go independent and make an off-brand Alice in the Zany Sanitarium line. So, everybody always says this, and I think most of you understand the difficulties in trying to do that. But I signed a piece of paper that said I would not be associated with or, directly produce a new Alice game. Now, I've had my lawyers say to me that that is a violation of right to work laws in California, and that it's a case waiting to happen. If someone, as an artist, produced something and then that person is blocked from being able to exploit it and to make new products with it, especially when it means it blocks their ability to a livelihood, there is an opportunity to go to California and to take EA to court and say, you have to let me work with this because it's my child. And according to the laws on the books right now, EA would lose that case. But as you can imagine, no one really wants to go and sue a big mega corporation who has, a market value in the billions of dollars when we barely have any pennies to scrape together. So it's best not to try to, poke the dragon like that. That being said, I don't know, maybe. I just don't think we're there yet. I think we still have a couple of moves to make in January, and let's just see what their response is, and then we can try to talk about, what to do next. Look, I can imagine that like one option, if they did come back and say no, one option would be we double down on presentation materials and we sketch out like the storyboards and the dialogue for the opening section of the game, and we send that to them. If we wanted to try to go bigger than that, maybe we try to raise the funds and we find a team and we actually build a vertical slice. It's expensive, we're talking $1 million+ to build a meaningful vertical slice, but we might be able to crowdfund $1 million. I don't think we can crowdfund $20 million, but we might be able to crowdfund $1 million, and maybe we could try to get support from Epic, and so there's a couple ways we could try that, to sort of double down on a pitch. But again, let's wait till January, and we'll see. Alice says, what is this throw in the towel you speak of? I do not believe this thread to be in my vocabulary. Yeah, no, I mean, look, I want to continue to fight, but I also want to continue to be realistic about, being transparent in where we are. Like, I don't want this to be this everlasting black hole that we feel like we're putting effort into without any hope of getting a project out of it, right? So, because that to me, I mean, it will start to feel depressing if I feel like we're not making progress. I actually like progress. So I think, throw in the towel, no, but I want to at least, depending on the information we get, I want to at least redirect our energies towards something that we think is going to work better. So like if they come back and they say, yeah, we're not that interested right now, I would take that not to mean it's a no. I would take that to mean we need to step up our presentation. So that would be the direction I'd probably want to go. Octo Chicken says, just keep pitching until they finally agree to have it made, just so everyone stops nagging them. I'm on board with this. I just think that, people nagging them would be a lot more effective if we had like 10 million people nagging them as opposed to, 10,000, right? So one of the things I see right now is that there's just not enough people being vocal about this to move the needle with EA. So it's something to think about. If it's an indie game, would it need to be a walking simulator, says Magus. Please sue EA, haha, says Carbon. No, not going to do that. Oh my God, I will contribute so much more money to your Patreon if you sue EA. It's not really a path I think we want to go down, but okay. What else have we got? Yeah, I don't know if we should put this on YouTube. Look, we're not saying anything here that's unusual or unheard of. Like, I think most people are aware of the situation I'm in with EA, and I think EA is aware, or they wouldn't have approached me back when they did to say, hey, we're aware of this situation and we actually think it's not great either, right? So they were the ones who opened this conversation. You have to keep in mind, they were the ones who came and said, Alice, which we understand is basically your IP, is just sitting on a shelf gathering dust. How can we work together to resolve that? So I think nothing unusual is being said here. Wendy says, I'll go up to 100 a month if you need a vertical slice. Yeah, we'd need 100 a month, and we'd need like 10,000 patrons. And then I think we could do a vertical slice. So in my experience, vertical slice production on like Alice Madness Returns, we spent like 1.5 or $2 million on that. And so it's not cheap. One of the stupid things about a vertical slice is that you have to prove 90% of the mechanics in the game, which means you have to implement 90% of the mechanics, and you have to build out like animation trees. You end up building a huge amount of stuff, and it's a big gamble. It's tough. So, alrighty. Connor says, don't forget to designate this video stream as not for children. My whole channel is marked as not for children, so not a problem. Octo Chicken says, how about taking some money from Star Citizen? They have 250 million lying around. Yeah, Star Citizen is an interesting story. I am kind of curious about how they managed to raise so much money. I understand like they have spaceships for sale that are $5,000, $10,000, and people actually pay money for that stuff. But that's going into sort of free to play and pay to win, and buying in-game equipment territory that I think most of us don't want to touch. So, all right, I think we're good on questions here. Connor says, if you reached out to all the FIFA fan base who are livid about the scripting and fixed win losses on a game they paid full retail for a limit challenge, you might get a lot of backing and pot stirring from EA's consumer base. Yeah, look, I don't really want to align ourselves with an angry mob because I think EA views us as a potential positive, as a way to say, hey, we can make really solid single player narrative driven games, and I don't think that going and like rounding up an angry mob to storm their castle is going to put us on the right side of them. One of the things to keep in mind, like we could sue and we could win, but then we'll never be friends with EA again. That rhymes. Keep that in mind. Okay. I think we're good on the questions. So if anybody else has questions about the update in general, throw them into the chat later on. I think we can come back to it. The next topic, if we're okay to move on, is the FAQ section. Yeah.
Sure.
So if you go over to AmericanMcGee.com, the Asylum Wiki, there is an FAQ section, and it does need a bit of fixing up because right now it's got some really old stuff in there, like Bumby not in game, and Red Queen and Queen of Heart, and there's absolutely no context or information on that line beyond that. So one of the things I was going to suggest is that a simple fix for this page would be a link to my YouTube channel where we do have an FAQ section, and a lot of FAQs have been answered there. So that might be one thing to do.
You might want to reload the page.
Reload the page. All right. I'm guessing that's already been done. Look at that. Amazing.
Right there.
And then I think if our insane children have any other ideas about things that they feel are FAQs, it would actually be nice to point people, when they ask these kinds of questions, point them to this page, and then they can see all these answers. Does anybody here have good examples of questions they see asked over and over again?
Is there a discussion tonight? When's the live stream? What time? That's all I ever see.
I think you're seeing those things on Discord, though, right?
Yeah, but I'm just saying in general, that's what I see the most of.
Well,
Well,
I
you went
think,
on the long rant about EA, which is good though. People have the big "I hate EA," so
yeah. I think there is an FAQ regarding EA on the on YouTube. So
There is. Got a
yeah,
few more FAQs ready to go up, haven't we? Got like 3 more ready and
Right.
waiting.
right. So Octo Chicken does mention a couple of the ones that we see quite often. So one of them is, can you not use EA? There is a response video to that. And then the next question is, when is this coming up, or I guess coming out? Again, that is something that's answered in one of the response videos. And then when is it set? I think that's sort of answered in one of those videos in terms of what it is we're doing and what the product is. So I think the response videos, but certainly I think pasting those into this page, those those questions do get asked a lot. So if we put those on the fact page, that would be great.
Truth Decay says, will you be returning to weekly streams and discussions, or is the bi-weekly the new schedule?
Yeah, so we did touch on this before we went live today. For those of you that follow along, you're probably aware that I think it's been like 3 weeks since we were able to do either a crowd design session and or maybe even 4 weeks since we did a live stream. I don't know. It's been a long time. We got caught in sort of a Bermuda Triangle of like my traveling, and then we had a kind of visa passport scare, and then we also had holidays, and so yeah, we're gonna go back to the every other week. I think that's bi-monthly, not bi-weekly, right? How do you say that? I always get my buys mixed up. Anyway, it'll be every other week that we would like to do live stream and crowd design session in a week, and then have a week off, and then back to being live, and then have a week off. That's the pattern that we'd like to get back to. I don't feel like we have enough content for doing this every single week. Plus, it's really disruptive to mine and Martin's schedule to do these every single week, because there's a lot of other stuff. Like I've got 500 posters I've got to send out, and you wouldn't believe how much time it takes to do that. So as soon as we finish today's session, I'm in fact going to start on poster stuff. Okay. Anything else that we want to talk about on the FAQ section here? I think if we just go through the list, the general, I mean, there is some basic stuff like, the setting. We should probably make that a little bit more clear. It's like set before, Alice is 13. She's in the asylum. I don't know why this Lewis Curl thing is like number 2. It seems kind
that
of
was
unusual.
brought up quite a bit when we first started this. If I recall.
I feel like it was brought up quite a bit by like one person. And
Yeah.
I don't see it much these days.
No. Yeah, the Red Queen, Queen of Hearts. I mean, this does come up quite a bit, and I still don't really fully understand it, because it's even listed. They are listed as separate characters on the Alice Madness Returns wiki. They're different characters in the books. So this question has always baffled me.
Well, you can blame how media comes up with people get too confused and merge it on.
Right. The platform question and the remasters question, I think it'd be good to have links to the actual videos over on YouTube, because there are specific answers to these in video format over there. Now, the concerns often brought up, look, this point on EA, I don't know how to hit this on the head, really. They're just as evil or not as any other corporation in the world. I mean, I'm shocked that more people aren't aware of exactly how evil Google is, for example, because if there was an evil corporation in the world right now that was actually doing significant damage to like cultural and political discourse, Google ought to be at the very top of that list, and people ought to be going and like burning down their campus for all of the like nonsense spying and manipulation that they're doing. Same goes for Facebook. And yet somehow people point their anxieties and frustrations at an entertainment company where you have a voluntary purchase, agreement with them. So anyway, look, EA, they make people angry. I don't really, there's nothing we're ever going to do to fix that. But I also don't think that EA are, at least in our situation, they're not really the devil. They're just making sort of the typical business decisions that any big publisher would make. I think our struggles to get this made would be exactly the same if we swapped out Activision or Microsoft or Sony for EA in this instance. It's a big commitment on their part, both to give away a license and also, like, let's say they decide to step in and fund. All of these things are not easy decisions for them to make. So that's it for the FAQ page. Unless anybody else wants to talk about the FAQ page.
Is there any more facts that need to be questioned from the people? I can start being really, really white again, if that helps.
Okay. So let's talk about the Hatter's domain and the simulation theory of Wonderland, shall we? I'm curious to know, I'm assuming that everybody who's now in the chat has actually read and thought about the two posts to which I'm referring. One of them was called Sketches and Annotations, and the other one was called, what was it? This is a test. Does anybody know? Bueller. All right, so the other one was called The Alchemist, and there you go. Greg got it. And so both of them basically sketch out the idea for the narrative being one in which adult Alice goes to reincorporate her child self, and we discover that the child self is contained within, let's call it a snow globe. It's a snow globe reality. She's shuttered behind a ball of glass, and she's kind of trapped in a Groundhog Day replaying of all the traumas that are at the core of her PTSD. And so it is adult Alice, the Alice we know after Madness Returns, who peers into that snow globe and is trying to figure out a way to reach young Alice and bring her out of that state and reincorporate so they can then move on. And from within, young Alice only sees what's happening as a kind of attack on her sanctuary. As messed up and broken of a sanctuary it is, it's also the only thing she's ever known. So she's essentially become comfortably numb inside of her trauma, inside of her suffering. And I think for anybody who's sort of suffered with PTSD and they've gone past the point of even trying to fix it, they'll understand that that can happen. So what we have and what I'm presenting here is that the game would actually be told 100% from young Alice's perspective, that there would be, from frame one of the game, no sign for us as the viewer or the player, no sign of adult Alice, no sign of the end of Madness Returns or any of the other things that have happened in the other two games. And we would only learn of those things as we moved through Asylum from the view of child Alice. And so she's going to slowly pick up the pieces that are leaking in from the outside as to the nature of her reality. And of course, the Wonderland inhabitants that are stuck inside of this globe with her will go from sort of being purely or somewhat against her to being against this invading force which threatens to dissolve their reality entirely, right? So that's kind of what's been presented. And so I'm curious to know, I see there's comments whether or not I'm quoting Linkin Park or Pink Floyd. They both had Numb songs. So, and I'm a fan of both. So you can say yes. I was quoting them both. So that's it. So I mean, where are we? What do the insane children think about this? I did see we had a lot of questions that were originally posted in the comments. I didn't see any more questions posted after the initial flurry, unless I missed some. So is there anyone with us today has a microphone, has questions? Or is everyone going to remain silent and make this really awkward?
Please share your voice. Come.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go through a couple of the comments over on Patreon because you guys are making it awkward here. So there are a lot of really positive comments about her new alchemy dress, and this is something I went back and forth with with Omri, because in the original timeline that we had, the bargaining stage was going to be one in which we saw Alice, young Alice, as the one who was sort of down on her knees and pleading to not have to confront the reality of the demise of her family. And since reworking this story, I actually think that what we're going to see is that it's Hatter who, in realizing what kind of threat his Wonderland faces, is the one essentially pleading for Alice to be their savior. Now, at that point, Alice is going to be all on board with that because she's going to think, yeah, we don't want Wonderland destroyed. But she won't at that point realize that Wonderland is sort of in that version of Wonderland is sort of holding her back from becoming who she needs to become. But this dress is representative of her going to work with alchemy as the tool, and then running around Wonderland and trying to patch things up and to fight off this mystery that's threatening to destroy all of them. So this was the reworked dress. I did post this online. It got a very positive response everywhere it went. The only negative response I saw to this at all was about the hair. I don't even pay attention to the hair, so I don't know what you guys think about the hair. But if you are curious to see this and you're listening on YouTube, there will be links in the description below, and the post that we're referring to is called The Alchemist. All right, Truth Decay has a microphone and is going to help us break the awkward silence.
Hooray!
Go.
Speak.
Hey, I'm unmuted. All right. I guess I was actually just curious, what was the motivation to have it that there's no influence of adult Alice from early in the game?
So it's a really good question, and I think this is what I was struggling with for such a long time that was making it really hard for me to write the story, and it was that it was confusing the issue of who is our protagonist, who is our hero. And what I figured out, and it was like an epiphany one night, and I think it might have been inspired by some game I was playing, but it was a really stupid, dumb thing. It was like, why do we have two heroes in the game? I don't know who I'm trying to write about here, and it's really difficult trying to juggle the perspective, because what I had thought was we were going to start the game with the kind of flash. Well, I thought maybe we were going to start the game with Alice at the end of Madness Returns, flashing back to Alice prior to the fire, the prior fire, and then we were going to continue forward to the asylum. And then there was going to be this kind of like adult Alice shadow character who somehow trailed along and maybe helped and maybe hindered throughout the journey. And the more I kept trying to piece that together, and I really tried, the more I found I couldn't make it work in a satisfying way. So it all comes back to just trying to focus the perspective. And the moment that I started thinking about it from the simple perspective of the opening scene of the game being young Alice in the denial stage. So I was thinking, right, I'd like the opening scene of the game to be just spectacular and beautiful and amazing, lush and gorgeous, and people who launch the game go, oh yeah, like your eyeballs have an orgasm. And then all of that falls apart. I liked that sequence, and I liked that it suddenly presents her story, and we start asking questions. Wait a second, who's this? Why is she small? Why is she little? where is the place? What version of Wonderland is this? Ah, shit, it's falling apart. Why is it falling apart? And it, for me, felt like I can set up a lot more mystery and questions about what it is that's happening to her that we care about and we want answered in that fashion than if I were to do it the other way we had been thinking about it. So that's a very long way of saying it simplifies and focuses the storytelling as far as I'm concerned. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
No thoughts really. That's just cool. And if it kind of got rid of that writer's block for you, then
Yeah, I think I was it's not blocked. I was just having a really tough time feeling I understood who I was following. And I noticed it from you guys as well, from the Insane Children. There seemed to be a lot of confusion and concern about like, well, who is Shadow Alice? Right? I mean, I saw that quite a lot, and I saw a lot of questions about like, who is Shadow Alice? What does she mean to the story? What does she mean to Alice? You know, why is she there? What is she doing? And I couldn't make it work. I know that there was multiple times in talking with Connor about this where he brought it up and he tried to give some alternative ideas for who she was and how she worked. I know the same was true with Greg. I just felt like we were struggling with it. And now that this is simplified to, look, it's just her perspective, it's just her story. She's trapped in this reality. She has no view of the outside world. She has no awareness of the things that have transpired in the other two games that we're aware of. And yet she can now learn about those things as she moves through this story. And she can escape this reality into one that's already been prepared for her to win. That makes a lot more sense to me. So I think that's why we got there. Any other thoughts there, Truth Decay?
well, not really. I guess I personally liked the idea of an adult reconciling with their child self just because it's meaningful to me.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be, doesn't have to follow that.
I think it's meaningful to a lot of people, and I think a lot of people don't realize that maybe ever or until it's too late. I think we, live in a kind of time and a place where the idea that we try to embrace some of the aspects of our child self and also to help heal ourselves, there's a lot of resistance to that, So I'm glad to hear that it makes sense to you. I want to make sure that everyone else is on board with it and finds things that are interesting about it. Also, look, I just had a kid, and then I'm looking at that kid in the face, and I'm realizing like, wow, I'm looking at a little me, and there's actually like a little me inside of me, like my child self, who's connecting with this little child here. And there's kind of realization of like the whole thing coming full circle. And then you realize there's a tremendous amount of healing in coming full circle on something like that. So I'm thinking, if we can capture that, it'll be meaningful and powerful to the people who play it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm out.
All righty. Thank you. Let's see. We've got some other comments here. If I was a conceptualizer of this project, I'd literally just flip through TikTok, watch and absorb every dramatic thing a young girl says. There's a lot on there, trust me. Should we ask why you're watching those things, Connor?
What the hell
And
is
put
TikTok?
those. TikTok is the video sharing app.
They made another one
here in China called Douyin. So it's owned by the Chinese. It's super popular here. The company's worth multiple billions of dollars, and so yeah, there's people sharing all kinds of interesting stuff. They're using it for marketing physical products and games. It's definitely worth checking out.
So it's like another Vine that got killed off too.
It's that, but
pretty much
huge.
Oh.
Yeah. But what Connor is saying is to watch the content there and put those concerns into the game, whether it's Alice's perspectives and opinions or actions, or the world and situations befalling her as metaphors for the awful aspects of the reality common young women of today are facing. That's a really good one. I think that makes a lot of sense. I also think that a lot of those afflictions, like you read about a lot of the disconnect that's happening for young women, but children in general who are growing up connected to PCs and phones and social networks, like the weird experience that they're having that's damaging core parts of their personality and damaging their ability to socialize is incredible. And I do think that there's something very powerful that we can talk about. I've been thinking about that a lot. I hadn't thought of using TikTok to research that, but I have been reading a lot of the psychology studies and a lot of the books on the breaking of socialization for this it's called E generation or Generation E, meaning that they've grown up on E things. I don't mean ecstasy, by the way. Everyone should grow up on ecstasy, but you shouldn't grow up on electronic devices because it screws you up. So that is something I'm thinking about quite a lot, and we'll see about how much of that we can incorporate. Vela says, Unravel, also an EA game, told a similar story from the perspective of an old woman remembering her childhood. That's how I always had this game's perspective. Yeah, I think that trope has been done. The older person telling the story of childhood. The problem in this is that we're asking the child to still be an active participant in the narrative. And I mean that in some way, the child is still inside of her mind, actively fighting against or participating in how the story is going to unfold. So it's like she's got dual personalities that are, one is the adult personality, one is the child personality, and they're fighting against each other. And when I tried to do that as two active voices, but both coming from within the same head, I just couldn't. I couldn't figure it out. So something to think about. Octo Chicken says, the only new idea suggestion I had was that perhaps the Vorpal blade arrives like a crashing meteor to Wonderland, a tool being sent down from above outside the snow globe to start things off, which is less a big story thought and more just an idea for a seal item. That's actually pretty cool. That the Vorpal blade, I've been trying to think about like what that inciting incident is. And I know that in some fashion, I thought, it's Hatter's workshop exploding. But the idea that this Vorpal blade comes, crashing down, sort of like a sword in the stone style. Try to say that fast. Sword in the stone style. That could actually be pretty cool. Like adult Alice is flinging the blade in there for her to pick up and use.
Yeah, but do you go doing royalty with some watery tart throwing swords at her?
Yeah, exactly. Nabby Yang says, works for me. I didn't get Shadow Alice. Yeah, I think I understand that. Angel Wings says, we missed the explanation, we think. I'm not sure what that means. Grats on the mini V, says Vela. Lucas says, my idea was to have you as an antagonist captain. Okay, this is not helpful. Connor, back to Connor, says, on Truth Decay's topic, I also really like adult reconciliation to child Alice making its way into the game somehow, namely because 13-year-olds' gripes bear little weight in society, but the concerns of 18-year-olds do, like climate change, pop culture, etc. TikTok is legitimately the most important thing in upcoming pop culture, and if you guys keep laughing it off, you're going to fall off the wave of relevance. Now, I think it's incredibly important, and that's what I was saying. Like, we as a business, like Mysterious, is looking at it as a form, as a pathway to marketing, and as a path to, improving our products. I don't know who's laughing it off. Maybe I missed that point, but I do think that as a view into the minds of audience and the minds of like people who are shaping the culture right now, these types of platforms are incredibly important. And if you don't get it, then okay, boomer. All right, Asteria Visual says, sounds pretty pointless to me. Okay, now we're arguing about TikTok.
I was just making a point. I'm done with that. We're trying to get back on topic.
All right, good. Where do I scroll down to so we're back to...
They're making fun of you for saying okay, boomer.
Yeah, well. TikTok,
I think
right.
Nabby Yang had a good point. about I want adult reconciliation
Yes.
at the very end.
Nabi Yang says, I want adult reconciliation at the very end. I want to see that Alice still sees Wonderland. It never got cured, but she's come to terms with it, and it's her own personal pleasure to see Wonderland whenever she wants. I think I might need someone to explain to me this concept of adult reconciliation. But for the other point that's made here, I want to be clear that what we will ultimately see is that child Alice breaks out of this snow globe world and she does reform with the adult. And that the last thing we will see is adult Alice healed and then, potentially re-entering into Wonderland in a positive and healthy way. So, this will end with, adult Alice and child Alice like, taking each other's hands and melding together and walking off into the Wonderland sunset. And I also want to make it clear that child Alice is going to learn adult Alice's story as she moves through this. So I guess you could take it like the previous mention of the story of the old woman who recalls the childhood life and flip that around. This is actually the child recalling the life of the adult who she's eventually going to become. If that makes sense. All right, I shouldn't have said okay, boomer. Sorry. Octo Chicken says exactly. Adult Alice throws down the vocal blade down into the globe as a way to give the child a chance to start changing her own world. Yep. All right. Any other questions? Lady Bladed Black says, what about the idea of hypnosis? Adult Alice putting herself back into the mind of her child self in an attempt to repair herself, but in the process loses focus and gets caught up in the events before. It would then make sense as to why we are in the mind of a child rather than one of an adult. That would make Shadow Alice or the mystery a part of herself that is making an effort to remind Alice of her purpose. Yeah. So this is going back to thinking about the perspective and the place of adult Alice in our story, which I want, as I just said, what I'd like to do is have our perspective be the child, and she learns about the adult as she's moving through the story. So maybe towards the end, there'll be something of a kind of hint as to what adult Alice did to initiate this journey with the child. But I don't think I want to kind of have anything in the game that front loads, hey, she did hypnosis and now this whole thing started off. But we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, we can still have the adult Alice interact, but your point is don't have it as a big flag at the start of the game. Have it so it's gradually put in, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, we've done this memory recovery thing before. She's recovered memories from the past. So this is basically she's recovering memories from the future. And she's starting to understand her own story that has passed her by as she's been trapped inside this snow globe of misery, right? Part of what I want to try to tell here is a story of hope from the perspective of someone who's trapped on how they might get themselves out. I was actually thinking, I've been thinking that part of what's going to be hidden in the storyline of this. So, like, take just one example. For instance, let's say you're incredibly depressed. You've been struck by PTSD, whatever the trauma is that's hit you in life. They say that one of the most important things that you can do is make yourself focus on constructive, positive tasks, right? So, one of the things that's going to happen immediately in the game is that she's going to have a task list. She's going to have a mission in front of her. Another thing that's important is the idea of sanctuary. So like healing yourself or having a space set aside for yourself where you can meditate, where you can focus, where you can heal, where you can escape from the triggers. And that's, important that place be away from all the things that may be linked to the pain that you're suffering. So now imagine that in the game, Alice has, sanctuary, the ability to pull up sanctuary anywhere she goes. So this is where I want to start wrapping all of the rules for self-healing into young Alice's behaviors in the game, and have the game itself be like a guide for how you solve this kind of stuff. Right.
Were you rubbing your hands just a little bit ago?
Was I?
Or the desk or something?
There
I
was
might
some
have been.
noises going on. Who
Yeah.
knows what it was?
Yeah, some people were
Huh.
picking it up and
I thought
saying
it
funny
sounded
things
like a
about
dog.
I wonder. Because I'm scratching the palms of my hands.
Oh,
Is it
that's what it
possible
is.
you actually hear me scratching the palms of my hands?
Yeah, they said it sounds like someone's like taking hits of a bong or something.
You just got noisy palms.
It's really weird. How I'm trying to keep myself like in my own little circle so that I don't get picked up by the microphone, and I'm just got my thumb in the palm of my hand. That's it. I mean, come on. Oh boy. This microphone is too much. It is a very sensitive mic. This is true.
Navi says, "Don't fart, America will hear it."
Yeah, I feel like you'd hear it anywhere in the house at this point. Okay. So what now I completely lost my train of thought. All right, well, it's session over. Goodbye.
Sorry.
That's it. So what else have we got? I mean, what else have we got for questions? What else do the insane children want to know about this or think about this? And while you're thinking about that, so what I'd like us to do is we're gonna get finished with the Hatter stuff we're working on right now, and then I'm gonna talk to Omri and the art team about going back and storyboarding some of these earlier scenes and kind of presenting what it would feel like visually from the moment that you turned the power on to start this game for the first time. And then we would have a sequence of scenes and events and dialogue that lead us in through, say, like first half hour or the first hour of this, and then we can also start to just, in the process of doing that, we rough out the larger arc and the beats, because I feel like now that I have a sense of where the perspective is, what the perspective is where we're telling the story from, it's going to be a lot easier for me to do that, and then we can start to work on that stuff together.
Yeah, that's kind of what Dr. Chicken just said. It said we need like a little bit more of the details, how the story arc's gonna go, so it can give us more of a look at it, and then build off from that,
Yeah.
discuss it.
Yeah. Someone says, so is it chart time then? Yes, it's charts time. We need charts of charts. Okay. Nabi Yang says, I'm particularly interested in her hysteria mode will be, is that this sanctuary? No, for sanctuary, I was thinking about it as a kind of, I guess it could be kind of like viewed as a shield or rest mechanic, but we'll probably double it up with maybe something like shrink, but that when she does it, if she shrinks and then sits still for a moment, you would use that to recharge all of your, let's call it mana and health or sanity and whatever, right? And so that's what I was thinking about for that. And that as you play through the game, you would occasionally find places to kind of shrink down and have this little sanctuary bubble pop up over you to recharge your batteries or to refill your magic and stuff like that. But again, it's like a double duty. So maybe you shrink and you continue to run through a tunnel. It's not really sanctuary, but if you shrink and you stop for a moment, it is. Lady Bladed Black says, I agree wholeheartedly that we shouldn't know how we are in the mind of child Alice until an appropriate time. I was just throwing out some ideas as to how it was done in the first place. I think that's a really excellent question as to how it was done in the first place. So if you remember at the very end of Alice Madness Returns, after she throws Dr. Poophead under the train, she then walks out and she sees what we would consider like Lunderland. So it's kind of a mix of London and Wonderland. And we don't know kind of what happens when she turns around the corner there, right? She kind of walks off into it. I actually think, it's obviously, that's a good place to pick back up. And I think she can pick back up by walking in there and then being told, yeah, your work's not done yet. There's still stuff to be repaired. And so let's pick it up from there. And I think just the act of going back into Wonderland, she can use that as the place from which she tries to reconnect with the child. And that's part of the story that we would probably see told from the child's perspective of like finally uncovering what it was that adult Alice did to reach her in that snow globe. By the way, I really like the snow globe analogy. I don't know about everyone else, but I like the idea that somewhere there's a like literal actual giant snow globe, and that adult Alice walks up to it and kind of tink 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 on the outside and realizes that shit, my child self is trapped inside of that thing. How am I going to get her out? And so that is, I think, a pretty fun idea. And I don't know if everybody saw that piece of art. It's with the Jabberwock wings spread behind adult Alice, and she's kind of wrapped in the black goo, but in her hands she's got the little snow globe, which is presumably what child Alice is hiding out inside of. There you go. Yeah, this one, it'll get finished, but I think this is sort of the core essence of the story that I'm trying to outline here. Is you've got the adult, and she's kind of wrapped in shadow because she is the adult. She has incorporated the shadow self. So as seen from the eyes of the child, that image makes a lot of sense. And she's kind of got like the wings of trauma on her back now, so represented by the Jabberwock. And then there in her hands is the little snow globe in which her child self has found sanctuary, but of course is sort of trapped.
I had a question.
Yes.
This one's just me. I do like that image, but I know Omri had drawn one previously, like except the Jabberwock was black. This one's green, like from the first game and all. In Asylum, do you know if he's gonna be black or green? Like, have you chosen yet, or?
We haven't decided yet.
Oh, okay.
No.
I really
haven't
like the
really
black
decided
one, but the green one's nice too. That was just my question.
I would imagine that in Asylum he's closer to sort of the natural form
Mm-hmm.
of the Jabberwock, because he becomes more mechanical as we move through the games, because he's made mechanical by
The Hatter.
the Hatter.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I imagine that when we find him in Asylum, it's going to be in his kind of like earlier natural form.
Oh, okay. That'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Mecha dragon. Blue eyes, white.
Yeah. So Lady Bladed Black says going into Lunderland is how she becomes aware that her work isn't done. Yeah. I mean, I think it makes a kind of nice dovetailing of the transition from the end of Madness Returns into the beginning of this game. It's she's completed her work, right? She's pushed Bumby under the train. That's closed a chapter in her life, and she turns on her heel and knows that the very next thing I need to do is, wash my hands of all of this and move on. But I can't do that unless I go and get back this thing I left behind so many years ago, which was my child self. And so she just, does Bumby and turns around and heads straight to recovering herself. That's one way to think about it. All right, we are at the top of the hour now, or the start of the hour. So maybe let's wrap it up here. Anything else in terms of questions, comments, or thoughts? Angel Wings says, perhaps she tries to pick up and fix Houndstitch, but she has trouble relating to the children because she spent a lot of her childhood catatonic, and so she tries to reintegrate with her child self. Yeah, it could be. Again, I don't know. don't know that she goes back there. I've thought about that quite a bit. Again, there's a lot of storytelling that has to happen if she does do something like that. And again, what happens when we start opening up that line of thinking is that we then have to represent that storytelling in some fashion in the game. So now are we going to have like an exposition scene in which we see her walking to the Hound's Ditch, and now we have to explain what Hound's Ditch is? I mean, one of the things to keep in mind, this is what I've struggled with quite a lot, is that there are going to be a lot of people playing this game who've never played any of the other Alice games. And so every reference to a previously existing concept like the Hound's Ditch home for wayward children requires exposition to set it up so it makes sense to someone who's never played the other games. The moment that we start to, unpack like, oh, hey, let's go back there, boom, that's more exposition. That's more content that has to be laid out in the game that I feel like we don't need, because I think there's a complete self-contained perfect little story inside that snow globe. So it's kind of what I've been thinking. But what else have we got here? Huge dark. Octo Chicken says, this huge dark monstrous thing breaks into your world to change it. Obviously, as a kid hanging out in denial, this would seem malicious and evil. So it might appear from the child Alice POV. Yeah, for sure. I mean, she's going to see what it is invading her space as, really scary. It's trying to pull her forward into something that she's just not really prepared for. So I think that what's going to happen in Asylum is we're going to see the child being solely prepared for the transition by the external forces. And she won't realize until it's sort of the right time that she's been preparing for that transition all along. All right, what else have we got in terms of comments? I always know it's the time for the stream to end when the comment section fills up with stuff that I don't understand. Okay. Connor Carbon has a closing thought. Keep the focus on the tortures of today's youth. We have entire generations of young adults and children that are in the age range of your version of Alice, and mental health disorders are rampant. The reason I keep saying browse TikTok and stay relevant is because the future of our world is in that generation's hands. Telling their story of their generation through this Alice game is the best way forward, in my silly little opinion. You already agreed with me on this mostly, but just adding it in for all to consider. So Connor, I'm not agreeing with you mostly. I mean, I'm agreeing with you entirely. I believe that one of the reasons that we're here to tell these stories, and you ask Martin, like, why does Out of the Woods exist? That project exists to bring forward in time the timeless lessons that are contained in these fairy tales about how the world is and how we should be in it in order to avoid chaos. This story, I think, can also contain a lot of those important lessons. Now, of course, when we're creating this kind of stuff, you don't want it to come off like an educational film, right? We don't want it to be preachy or it'll be rejected. And there's only so much that a game can do by way of solving this kind of stuff. But for sure, it can have a voice in the conversation, and so I think that it is exactly what we're trying to do, right? So no worries there. What else have we got? All right, looks like that's it. I am going to stop reading your comments because they just confuse me. This has been crowd design session number 22, in which we've talked about Alice Asylum and all the things related to that. If you've been following along on YouTube, please do scroll down to the links in the description below. There you will find ways to look up references to all of the art, story, and other things that we have discussed today. And you'll find links to Patreon. So if you would like to support the work that we're doing here in terms of art and story and design, and if you would like to join these sillies in the chat here as they talk about stuff that I just don't understand, the links to Patreon are also in the description below. Anybody else want to say anything before we say farewell?
Keep it up.
Awkward silence.
Awkward silence. Get bent. Get bent
Yeah.
was not found. Please use get help to figure out whether or not that command is accepted.
Connor says, "This was live. Leave a YouTube comment as if it was live."
Oh, that
I
guy.
think that's
They
our
do.
good friend. That's our good friend whose name I've spaced out now. But anyway, yes, he likes to leave comments on YouTube as if this was a live thing. So,
Is it
all right,
Hamish?
everybody. Hamish. Hey, Hamish, we're talking about you. All right, everybody. I hope you all have a good rest of the day. We will see you again later in the week over on YouTube for a live stream. So keep an eye on Patreon and our other social channels for notification about that. Bye bye. Get bent.
See you
Talk
later.
to you later.